Welcome, dear listeners, to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight we invite you to drift into peaceful slumber as we explore one of humanity's most enigmatic mysteries, the Anunnaki, and the advanced technology they may have brought to our ancient world. Let your mind wander through the mists of time, back to an age when gods walked among mortals, and the boundaries between myth and reality blurred like watercolours in the rain. Close your eyes now, breathe deeply. Let the tensions of your day dissolve into the darkness. Tonight's journey will carry you through ancient Mesopotamia, across forgotten civilizations, and into the realm of possibilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about human history. The story begins over 6,000 years ago, in the land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, where the cradle of civilization first rocked humanity into consciousness. But perhaps, just perhaps, we were not alone in that awakening. In the beginning, according to the ancient Sumerians, there was only the primordial sea. From this cosmic ocean emerged the first gods, beings of immense power and knowledge. But these were not the gods of later religions, distant and unknowable. These were the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. And they walked among humans, teaching, guiding, and according to some interpretations, genetically engineering the very species we would become. The word Anunnaki itself whispers secrets across the millennia. In the Sumerian language, it can be broken down into components that suggest those who from heaven came, or princely offspring. These beings appear throughout Mesopotamian texts, depicted not as abstract spiritual entities, but as physical beings with needs, desires, hierarchies, and most intriguingly, technology. Let yourself drift now. Imagine standing in ancient Sumer, 5,000 years before the Common Era. The air is warm, carrying the scent of date palms and the fertile soil of the riverbanks. You watch as priests in white linen robes ascend the great ziggurats, those massive stepped pyramids that dominated the skyline of every major Sumerian city. But these were not merely temples. According to the ancient texts, they were meeting places, landing platforms, communication centres between earth and sky. The cuneiform tablets, those wedge-shaped writings pressed into wet clay and baked hard by the Mesopotamian sun, tell us extraordinary things. They speak of the Anunnaki as a council of deities, numbering variously as 7, 12, or even 50 great gods, with hundreds of lesser divine beings serving beneath them. But reading between the lines of mythology, some researchers have suggested we're actually reading ancient humanity's attempt to describe something they had no proper vocabulary for: advanced technology and extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. Consider the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature. In this ancient story, we encounter Gilgamesh himself, described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human. How did the ancient Sumerians conceive of such specific genetic ratios? The text describes him as possessing superhuman strength, extraordinary longevity, and wisdom beyond mortal ken. Was this merely poetic exaggeration, or could it represent genuine genetic engineering, a blending of Anunnaki and human DNA? The tablets speak of the Anunnaki creating humans to serve as workers, to labour in the gold mines and fields that the gods themselves grew weary of tending. The Atrahasis epic, dating back nearly 4,000 years, tells this story in remarkable detail. It describes how the lesser gods, the Igigi, toiled endlessly in the mines digging precious metals from the earth. Eventually, exhausted and rebellious, they went on strike, refusing to continue their back-breaking labour. The great Anunnaki Council convened to solve this crisis. Enki, the god of wisdom, fresh water and crafts, proposed a solution. He would create a primitive worker, a being capable of intelligent labour but subordinate to the gods. The text describes how Enki, with the help of the mother goddess Ninmah, took clay mixed with the blood of a slain god, and from this combination created humanity. But let us examine this story with modern eyes as you drift deeper into relaxation. Clay. Could this be ancient terminology for basic biological material, perhaps stem cells or genetic material? The blood of a god. Might this represent Anunnaki DNA, the genetic code necessary to create a being intelligent enough to serve but engineered to be controllable? The mixing of materials. Does this sound like ancient mythology, or does it sound like a description of genetic engineering witnessed by people who had no scientific framework to describe what they were seeing. The text goes on to describe how the first attempts at creating humans were flawed. Some were too weak, others malformed, unable to reproduce or sustain themselves. Only through repeated trials did Enki and Ninmah succeed in creating the human prototype, the model that would be mass-produced to serve the Anunnaki's needs. This iterative process sounds remarkably like experimental genetic engineering, with all its false starts and refinements. Now let your mind drift to the technology the Anunnaki supposedly possessed. The ancient texts overflow with descriptions that seem impossible for the time period in which they were written. We read of the Mi, sacred tablets or devices that contained all knowledge and power. In Sumerian mythology, these Mi were not abstract concepts but physical objects that could be stolen, transferred, or lost. They granted their possessor power over specific domains: the Mi of kingship, the Mi of warfare, the Mi of sexual intercourse, the Mi of writing, the Mi of metalworking. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, famously tricked Enki into giving her many of his Mi while he was drunk. She loaded them onto her boat and fled to her own city before he could reclaim them. This sounds less like abstract divine powers and more like advanced technology. Perhaps data storage devices, computers, or tools that contained programmed knowledge and capabilities. Imagine artificial intelligence stored on quantum drives, knowledge banks that could be physically transported and implemented, giving an entire civilization instant access to advanced capabilities. The descriptions of Anunnaki transportation are equally fascinating as you sink deeper into comfort. The texts speak of boats that could fly through the sky, of celestial chariots that moved like the wind. Enlil, king of the gods, possessed a storm bird that could rise into the heavens with a terrible roaring. Is this mythology, or is this ancient humanity's attempt to describe aircraft, rockets, or some form of anti-gravity vehicle? In the Epic of Etana, we read of a shepherd king who rode on the back of an eagle high into the sky, so high that the earth below became tiny, shrinking first to the size of a mountain, then a mere speck. The text describes the experience in terms that sound remarkably like someone describing their first view of Earth from altitude or even from space. The eagle tells Etana to look down, and he sees the earth and sea diminishing below him in a way that perfectly matches what we know about the visual experience of ascending into the atmosphere. The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, describes Marduk, the city god of Babylon who became king of all gods, possessing weapons that sound far beyond the Bronze Age technology of when the text was written. He wields weapons that shoot out rays of light, that create thunder and lightning at will, nets that can trap the winds, and a bow that launches arrows of fire. Are these divine powers, or descriptions of energy weapons, electromagnetic containment fields, and projectile systems that ancient witnesses simply had no vocabulary to accurately describe? Let yourself sink even deeper now, your breathing slow and regular, as we explore the construction achievements attributed to the Anunnaki. The ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia remain engineering marvels. These massive structures, built from millions of mud bricks, rose in steps toward the heavens, some reaching heights of over 200 feet. The great ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BCE, still partially stands today, its core solid after more than 4,000 years. But according to the texts, these weren't built by human hands alone. The Anunnaki supervised their construction, provided the plans, and according to some interpretations, supplied technology that made their construction possible. The precision of these ancient structures is remarkable. The bases were perfectly level, the corners aligned with astronomical precision to the cardinal directions. The interior chambers were designed with ventilation systems, water management, and acoustic properties that seem far too sophisticated for the supposed technological level of the time. Some researchers have noted that certain chambers in ancient ziggurats have acoustic properties that would amplify or focus sound in specific ways. Were these designed as communication centres, perhaps to amplify human prayers, or might they have served more technological purposes? The Sumerian King List, a document that chronicles the rulers of ancient Sumer, begins in a startling way. It lists kings who ruled before a great flood, and their reigns are measured not in years, but in periods that span tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the first king of Eridu, supposedly ruled for 28,800 years. His successor, Alalngar, reigned for 36,000 years. 8 kings total are listed before the flood, with reigns totaling 241,200 years. Modern historians dismiss these numbers as mythological exaggeration, but what if we interpret them differently? What if these weren't human kings, but Anunnaki rulers, beings whose lifespans stretched far beyond human comprehension? Or what if the counting system referred to something other than Earth years? Perhaps orbital periods of their home planet, or some other measure of time that made sense to them but became garbled in translation through human scribes. After the flood, the king list notes that kingship descended from heaven once again, and the reigns of subsequent rulers, while still impossibly long by human standards, gradually decrease over time. The kings immediately after the flood reign for thousands of years, then hundreds, then finally reaching normal human lifespans in the historical period we can verify. This pattern suggests either a gradual withdrawal of direct Anunnaki rule, or, intriguingly, a genetic dilution as Anunnaki DNA mixed more and more with human DNA, reducing longevity with each generation. Let your mind wander now through the halls of the ancient temple complexes. The Iabzu, the temple of Enki in Eridu, was said to be built over the Abzu itself, the primordial freshwater ocean beneath the earth. But archaeological excavations have revealed something curious. Beneath the oldest temples of Eridu, there are water channels, complex hydraulic systems that don't seem to serve any obvious religious purpose. Were these merely ritual washing facilities, or was something more going on? Were these ancient water purification systems, hydroelectric power generation, or even coolant systems for underground technological installations? The texts describe certain rooms in the temples as forbidden to all but the highest priests, chambers where the statues of gods resided. But these statues were not treated like artwork or symbols. They were fed, clothed, bathed, and spoken to daily. The texts describe how the statue's mouth would be opened in elaborate ceremonies, after which it could see, hear, and speak. To modern ears, this sounds like the activation of some kind of technology, perhaps android servants, communication devices, or sophisticated AI that ancient priests maintained and consulted. In the Sumerian text, Inanna's descent to the underworld, the goddess must pass through 7 gates, removing one article of power at each gate until she enters the underworld naked and vulnerable. Each gate strips away one of her one of her divine powers. This sounds ritualistic, but what if it describes a security protocol? Each gate requires surrendering one piece of technology, one access device, until the visitor enters a secure zone stripped of all technological advantages. Your breathing grows slower, deeper, more peaceful as we continue. The underworld itself, the realm of Ereshkigal, sister of Inanna, is described in ways that don't quite match our typical conception of an afterlife. It's reached by descending through the earth, through passages and gates. It's dark, but apparently inhabited by conscious beings, both dead humans and living gods who traverse between realms. The text describes it as having its own laws, rules that even the great gods must obey when they enter. Might this describe a physical place? Underground facilities? Ancient installations built deep beneath the earth, accessible only through controlled entry points? We find similar descriptions in other ancient cultures that may have encountered the Anunnaki or their technology. The Egyptian gods, particularly the Netru of the pre-dynastic period, share remarkable similarities with the Anunnaki. They too possessed advanced knowledge, taught humanity arts and sciences, and were associated with specific locations, particularly underground chambers and complexes like those beneath the Sphinx and the pyramids. The Egyptian god Thoth, keeper of all knowledge and magic, was said to have hidden books of wisdom containing all the secrets of the universe. These books of Thoth were supposedly sealed in a golden box buried in the Nile. Doesn't this sound like advanced technology or data storage being deliberately hidden, perhaps when the Anunnaki withdrew from direct human contact? Consider the precision of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This massive structure, built from over 2 million stone blocks, is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60th of a single degree. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants, including pi and phi. The 4 sides of its base are equal to within a few centimetres, despite spanning over 750 feet. The blocks fit together so precisely that a knife blade cannot be inserted between many of them. Traditional archaeology attributes this to Bronze Age tools and human labour, but an alternative view suggests the design, if not the construction, came from beings with far more advanced knowledge. The Egyptian texts themselves claim that the god Thoth provided the plans for the pyramid, and that it was built in a single night by the gods before humans continued the work. Could this describe an initial high-tech construction phase, establishing the precise foundations and core structure, with humans then completing the project using the framework provided? The pyramid texts, oldest religious writings in ancient Egypt, describe the pharaoh's ascension to the heavens using explicitly technological terms. He climbs a ladder or rope, he rides in a boat through the sky, he transforms into a being of a light. The text speaks of opening doors in the sky, of the pharaoh travelling to the imperishable stars. The language blends the poetic and mystical with what sound like descriptions of actual transportation to somewhere beyond Earth. Let yourself drift deeper still, into the realm between waking and dreaming, where ancient mysteries seem more real than the modern world you've left behind. Back in Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki were organised in a clear hierarchy. At the top sat Anu, king of the gods, who remained mostly in the heavens. Beneath him were his sons, Enlil, lord of the air and commander of earth operations, and Enki, lord of the waters and chief scientist. These two brothers, according to the texts, were often in conflict over how humanity should be treated. Enlil viewed humans as noisy slaves, useful only for labour. He's credited with sending the Great Flood to wipe out humanity when their numbers grew too large and their noise disturbed his rest. Enki, more sympathetic to his creation, secretly warned the human Ziusudra, or Utnapishtim in later versions, to build an ark and save himself, his family and the animals. This story, predating the biblical flood account by over 1,000 years, appears in multiple Mesopotamian texts with consistent details. The flood is not divine punishment for human wickedness, but a deliberate attempt at genocide by Enlil, frustrated with his experiment's success. Enki's intervention is an act of rebellion against the decision of the council. After the flood, when Enlil discovers that humans survived, he is initially furious but eventually accepts that humanity will persist. What are we to make of this narrative? It suggests factionalism among the Anunnaki, disagreement about the ethics of their genetic experiments. It portrays Enki as more compassionate, perhaps guilty about creating sentient beings only to see them enslaved and eventually sentenced to extermination. The story humanizes these beings, giving them complex motivations, moral debates, and political conflicts. They seem less like abstract gods, and more like people with advanced capabilities. The flood itself is described in remarkably consistent terms across cultures. The Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Hebrew, Greek, and Hindu traditions all record a catastrophic deluge that destroyed the world, from which only a select few survived by building boats. The timescale suggested by various sources places this event somewhere between 7,000 and 12,000 years ago, coinciding with the end of the last ice age and the rapid sea level rises that accompanied it. Could the flood have been natural, a worst catastrophic result of climate change at the end of the Younger Dryas period? Or was it triggered deliberately, perhaps by Anunnaki technology? Some researchers have speculated about weapons capable of melting ice caps, of triggering seismic events that would cause mega tsunamis. The texts describe the gods themselves fleeing to the heavens, terrified by the magnitude of destruction they'd unleashed, suggesting even they were overwhelmed by what happened. After the flood, the relationship between Anunnaki and humanity shifted. The texts describe a new arrangement where humans would be given knowledge and civilization, allowed to develop cities and kingdoms, but the direct presence of the gods would diminish. It's as if the Anunnaki stepped back from day-to-day management, moving into an advisory or overseer role rather than active rulers. This is when we see an explosion of human civilization. Within a few centuries of the flood, according to traditional chronology, we go from scattered hunter-gatherer tribes to sophisticated city-states, with writing, mathematics, astronomy, advanced agriculture, metallurgy, and complex social organization. The speed of this development has always puzzled historians. How did so much progress happen so quickly? The ancient answer is simple: the gods taught us. Enki taught humanity writing and mathematics. Ninurta taught agriculture and irrigation. Ishtar taught the arts of civilization and social organization. Each Anunnaki deity was responsible for transmitting knowledge in their domain of expertise. From a technological transfer perspective, this makes perfect sense. Rather than letting humans slowly develop everything through trial and error over thousands of years, the Anunnaki simply gave them the knowledge, like seeding a civilization with a starter pack of essential technologies and information. Your body is completely relaxed now, your mind drifting in that peaceful space between conscious thought and dream. Let the ancient world envelop you. The astronomical knowledge of ancient Sumer is particularly remarkable and suggestive of Anunnaki technological transfer. The Sumerians had detailed knowledge of all the planets in our solar system, including their colours, sizes, and orbital periods. They knew that Earth was round, that it orbited the Sun, and they could predict eclipses with accuracy that wouldn't be matched again until the Renaissance. But here's what's truly extraordinary. Sumerian astronomical texts describe planets that ancient humans couldn't possibly have seen with the naked eye. They knew about Uranus and Neptune, planets not officially discovered by modern astronomy, until telescopes became powerful enough in the 18th and 19th centuries. They described the colours of these distant worlds correctly. Uranus as greenish blue, Neptune as deeper blue. How did they know? The orthodox explanation is that they didn't, that later scribes must have interpolated information, or that the translations are incorrect. But the alternative explanation is obvious. They were told by beings who had actually visited these worlds, or at least had telescopic or other technology capable of observing them. The famous Sumerian cylinder seal, VA243, held in the Berlin Museum, depicts what appears to be a solar system with 11 celestial bodies orbiting a sun. If interpreted as an astronomical diagram, it shows all the planets we know, but it also shows an additional planet, a large body in an elliptical orbit that brings it through the solar system periodically. Researcher Zecharia Sitchin famously identified this as Nibiru, the homeworld of the Anunnaki. According to Sitchin's interpretation of the texts, Nibiru is a planet with a 3,600-year elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system periodically. When Nibiru is in the inner solar system, the Anunnaki can easily travel to Earth. When it swings out to the far reaches of its orbit, contact becomes more difficult. This would explain the cyclical nature of Anunnaki appearances in human history, their periodic withdrawals and returns. Mainstream astronomy dismisses the idea of such a planet, pointing out that its gravitational effects would be obvious, and that no evidence supports such an orbit. However, in recent years, astronomers have seriously proposed the existence of Planet 9, a large planet in the outer solar system whose gravitational effects might explain the unusual orbits of certain trans-Neptunian objects. While Planet 9, if it exists, is nothing like Sitchin's Nibiru, it demonstrates that our solar system may still hold undiscovered worlds. The Anunnaki's need for gold is a central theme in many texts. The question is, why? Gold is relatively rare on Earth's surface, having sunk into the core during planetary formation. It's chemically inert, making it useful for certain applications but hardly essential for most purposes. Why would advanced beings capable of interstellar travel need to mine gold from Earth? Some researchers suggest gold's unique properties make it valuable for advanced technology. It's the best conductor of electricity that doesn't corrode. It's used in modern electronics, spacecraft shielding, and even in some medical applications. A truly advanced civilization might need vast quantities of monoatomic gold for purposes we can barely imagine. Perhaps in power generation, energy transmission, or even in supporting biological systems if the Anunnaki's atmosphere or biology required it. The texts describe extensive mining operations, particularly in Africa. The Igigi gods, before the creation of humanity, laboured in these mines. When humans were created, we took over this work. Archaeological evidence has found extensive ancient mining operations in southern Africa, dating back over 100,000 years, far older than civilizations that would supposedly need mined materials. Stone tools and mining shafts have been found in regions of South Africa that show organised, large-scale mining operations from truly ancient times. Let your mind drift through those ancient mines now, imagining the dark tunnels, the flicker of torchlight on stone walls, the sound of tools striking rock. But imagine too a different kind of light, perhaps the glow of advanced equipment, the hum of machinery far beyond primitive technology, managed by beings who looked human, but possessed capabilities we would consider godlike. The genetic engineering aspect of the Anunnaki story deserves deeper examination. Multiple texts describe the creation of humans as involving the mixing of divine and earthly elements. The Atrahasis epic specifies that clay was mixed with the blood of a slain god, specifically the god Wi'ila, whose name means intelligence. This being was sacrificed, his blood mixed with earth, and from this combination, humanity was shaped. From a modern genetic engineering perspective, this narrative makes remarkable sense. Take the base genome of an existing primate species, the clay or earthly element, combine it with Anunnaki genetic material, the divine blood, and you create a hybrid species, intelligent enough for complex tasks but genetically distinct from the creators. The specific mention that the slain god's name meant intelligence suggests the trait being transferred was cognitive enhancement. The texts describe how Ninmah, the mother goddess, shaped 14 pieces of clay into 7 male and 7 female forms. This sounds like cloning technology, creating multiple identical specimens from genetic material, separated into male and female lines. The story specifies that these prototypes were refined over time, with early versions having various defects that later versions corrected. This iterative improvement process is exactly what modern genetic engineering requires. The Bible in Genesis preserves echoes of this story but sanitized for monotheistic belief. God creates Adam from dust, then breathes life into him. This breath of life might represent the insertion of Anunnaki genetic material. Later, Eve is created from Adam's rib, which sounds like cloning technology, creating a female from male genetic material. The Garden of Eden itself, a restricted zone where humans lived under direct divine supervision, sounds remarkably like a controlled research facility. The serpent in Eden, who tempts humanity to eat from the tree of knowledge, might represent Enki, whose symbol was the serpent, teaching humanity things Enlil wanted kept secret. The fall of man, the expulsion from paradise, could represent humanity being granted independence, moved out of the controlled laboratory environment, and allowed to spread across the world. Your breathing is so slow now, so peaceful, as you drift deeper into this ancient story that seems to explain so much. The Nephilim present another fascinating piece of the puzzle. The Bible mentions them briefly. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The Book of Enoch, considered apocryphal, expands on this story, describing how 200 watchers, angels sent to observe humanity, rebelled and took human wives. Their offspring were giants, beings of great strength and appetite who terrorized humanity. This matches remarkably well with Anunnaki stories of gods taking human consorts. Gilgamesh himself was the product of such a union, as were many of the kings and heroes of ancient times. These hybrids possess strength, longevity, and abilities beyond normal humans, but were not fully Anunnaki. They became the ruling class, the semi-divine kings who bridged the gap between gods and mortals. The texts describe these hybrids as often problematic. They consumed vast resources, were sexually voracious, demanded worship and tribute, and fought among themselves. The Book of Enoch suggests that the flood was sent specifically to wipe out these Nephilim and their corrupted civilization, cleansing the earth for a fresh start with pure humans. If we interpret this technologically rather than mythologically, we might be looking at a genetic experiment that went wrong. Creating hybrid beings with enhanced capabilities but without the full knowledge, discipline, or longevity of the Anunnaki themselves produced a dangerous ruling class. These hybrids exploited humanity, used their advantages for personal gain, and destabilized the Anunnaki's carefully managed civilization. The solution was radical: exterminate the hybrids and most of humanity, then restart with strict controls against future hybridization. The Sumerian king list supports this interpretation. Before the flood, we see impossibly long-lived rulers, perhaps pure Anunnaki or early generation hybrids who retained significant longevity. Immediately after the flood, lifespans drop but remain very high. Later generation hybrids with diluted Anunnaki genetics. Over subsequent generations, lifespans gradually approach normal human range as the genetic modifications bred out of the population. By the time we reach the historical period with verifiable records, humans have normal lifespans, though some families claiming direct descent from the gods maintained their legitimacy and ruled as kings. The ancient concept of divine right kingship, the idea that certain bloodlines were inherently superior and entitled to rule, might stem from genuine genetic differences that had been relevant but were diminished by millennia of interbreeding. Let us consider the technology of communication. The ancient texts describe various devices the gods used to communicate across vast distances. Enki possessed a boat of heaven, from which he could see and hear everything happening on Earth. Inanna had a pilot who could send and receive messages instantaneously across any distance. Marduk had a weapon that could strike with lightning from the sky. To ancient observers, telecommunications would seem magical. A device that lets you see and hear someone on the other side of the world, that's godlike power. Satellites that can monitor surface activity, divine omniscience, directed energy weapons that strike from the sky, the thunderbolts of the gods. The myth of the Tower of Babel, where humanity attempted to build a tower to heaven, and God confused their languages to stop them, might describe an attempt by early post-flood humans to rebuild high technology, perhaps a communications or transportation tower. The Anunnaki, not wanting humans to regain technological independence too quickly, sabotaged the project and scattered the populations, ensuring they would develop separately without sharing knowledge. Scattered throughout Mesopotamian sites, archaeologists have found curious objects that don't fit the expected technology of the time. Small precision-machined objects, pieces of what might be ancient batteries, the Baghdad battery, lenses ground to optical quality, and devices whose purpose remains mysterious. Orthodox archaeology struggles to explain these artifacts, usually dismissing them as modern contamination or misidentified objects, but they might represent remnants of Anunnaki technology, pieces left behind, or copies made by humans attempting to replicate what they'd seen. The concept of me deserves deeper exploration. These objects, described as tablets, stones, or devices that contain specific powers and knowledge, were apparently physical objects that could be stolen, lost, or transferred. Whoever possessed the appropriate me had the knowledge and authority in that domain. This sounds remarkably like our modern digital technology. A me might have been something like a USB drive containing specialized software, AI systems, or databases. Possession of the me of kingship might mean having access to governmental AI, administrative software, and communication networks that allowed effective rule. The me of metalworking might contain databases of metallurgical knowledge, techniques, and formulas. When Inanna stole many-me from Enki, she was essentially stealing technology and data. She loaded them onto her boat, perhaps a transport vehicle or storage device, and fled before Enki sobered up and realized what he'd lost. Enki sent various beings to retrieve the ME, but Inanna's pilot successfully defended against each attack, suggesting some kind of defensive technology protecting her vessel. The texts describe how cities that possess certain me flourished in those domains, while cities that lacked them struggled. Eridu, Enki's city, excelled in wisdom and water management. Uruk, Inanna's city after she acquired her stolen me, became dominant in warfare politics and cultural arts. This pattern matches technological development. Cities with better technology and knowledge prosper, while those without access to such advantages lag behind. Your mind drifts now through the ancient cities, imagining the great temples lit not just by torches but by something else, some kind of artificial light source that cast a steady glow. You imagine priests not just praying but operating devices, consulting with AI systems they believed were gods, maintaining technology they incompletely understood. The ziggurat at Eridu, rebuilt multiple times over thousands of years, each time larger than the last, sat atop something older. Excavations show that the earliest temples at the site go down through 17 levels of construction, each built atop the ruins of the previous one. The lowest levels date to before 5000 BCE, making them among the oldest religious structures ever found. But what if that lowest level wasn't built by humans at all? What if it was an original Anunnaki installation, upon which humans built again and again, maintaining and enlarging a site whose original purpose they'd forgotten, but still considered sacred? The Epic of Gilgamesh contains a curious episode where Gilgamesh, seeking immortality after the death of his friend Enkidu, journeys to visit Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood who was granted eternal life. The journey takes Gilgamesh through a tunnel, a passage through the mountains that is 12 leagues of darkness. This tunnel is perfectly straight, perfectly dark, and Gilgamesh must run through it as fast as possible, because the sun's path also goes through this tunnel at night. What kind of tunnel runs perfectly straight through a mountain for 12 leagues, roughly 40 miles? What kind of tunnel does the sun allegedly travel through? This description sounds like it might preserve a memory of some kind of transportation tunnel, perhaps a hyperloop-style system, or underground passage that ancient observers conflated with mythological cosmology. Gilgamesh eventually reaches a paradise garden, where plants bear jewels as fruit and everything is perfect. There he meets the goddess Siduri, who tries to convince him to give up his quest and enjoy mortal life. When he persists, she directs him to Utnapishtim, who lives across the waters of death, waters that kill any who touch them. Gilgamesh must find Urshanabi, the ferryman, who possesses certain stone things that allow the boat to cross these deadly waters without the boat or passengers touching the water itself. These stone things are eventually destroyed during the crossing, making the return journey problematic. What are these mysterious objects? They sound like technology. Perhaps anti-gravity devices, energy field generators, or something similar that could lift a boat above poisonous or radioactive water. Utnapishtim, when Gilgamesh finally reaches him, tells the story of the flood in detail. He describes how Ea, another name for Enki, warned him by speaking through the walls of his house, perhaps an intercom or communication device. Ea gave him exact specifications for the boat, including precise dimensions, materials, and construction techniques. The boat was to be a perfect cube, a shape unusual for vessels but perhaps optimal for surviving a catastrophic flood or even serving another purpose. The text specifies that Utnapishtim covered the boat with pitch inside and out, but also mentions loading it with all the silver I had, all the gold I had, all the living creatures I had. Why specifically mention silver and gold? These metals might have been merely wealth, or they might have had technological significance. Silver for its conductivity and antibacterial properties, gold for its inertness and electronic applications. When the flood begins, the description is terrifying. The gods themselves flee to the highest heavens, cowering like dogs. The storm is so fierce that even the gods are frightened by what they've unleashed. For 6 days and 7 nights, the storm rages, then suddenly stops. Utnapishtim opens a hatch and looks out to find the entire world covered with water, as flat as a rooftop, with all of humanity turned to clay. The boat eventually grounds on Mount Nimush. Utnapishtim sends out birds to test if the waters have receded. First a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. When the raven doesn't return, he knows the waters have subsided enough. This detail appears in flood myths across cultures, including the biblical account, suggesting a common source or actual historical event preserved in multiple traditions. After leaving the boat, Utnapishtim makes a sacrifice, and the gods, having starved without human offerings during the flood, gather around like flies. This strikingly undignified description suggests the gods were dependent on something humans provided. Was it literally food offerings, or does this represent some kind of resource or service humans supplied that the Anunnaki needed? Enlil arrives, furious that anyone survived his planned extermination. But Enki defends his actions, arguing that humanity deserved a chance and that Enlil's decision was unjust. Eventually Enlil accepts reality and grants Utnapishtim and his wife immortality, but they are placed far away from the rest of humanity, across the deadly waters, ensuring they cannot share their knowledge or the secret of eternal life. This secret of eternal life is itself a provocative element. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh about a plant that grows at the bottom of the sea, a plant that can restore youth. Gilgamesh obtains this plant but loses it to a serpent, Enki's symbol again, before he can use it. The plant grants the serpent the ability to shed its skin and renew itself. What is this plant? A metaphor for genetic therapy, life extension technology, or an actual botanical source of longevity-enhancing compounds? The search for immortality threads through ancient texts from many cultures. The gods possess it naturally. Humans occasionally gain it through divine favour. The difference between mortals and immortals is seemingly biological, not spiritual, suggesting it's a matter of genetics or technology rather than metaphysics. The Anunnaki pantheon included specialised gods for every domain. Niseba was goddess of writing and accounting. Ninkasi was goddess of beer. Nergal was god of plague and war. Each deity had specific functions, specific responsibilities within the overall system. This sounds less like a traditional polytheistic pantheon, and more like a departmentalised organisation or administrative structure. Imagine if we made contact with a less advanced civilization today. We might send a mission with specialists, engineers, biologists, anthropologists, military personnel, administrators. To the contacted civilization, unable to distinguish between these roles or understanding our technology, we might all seem like gods, but gods with different powers and responsibilities. The goddess of writing might be the mission's communications officer. The god of smithing could be the chief engineer. The conflicts between Anunnaki gods take on new meaning in this context. These weren't cosmic battles between abstract forces, but political conflicts between individuals or factions. Marduk, son of Enki, eventually usurped Enlil's position as king of the gods. The Enuma Elish describes this in terms of Marduk defeating Tiamat, the primordial chaos monster, and creating the world from her corpse. But older texts suggest something else. A political revolution where Marduk, championing the city of Babylon, overthrew the old order centered on Enlil's city of Nippur. This political reading makes the divine myth suddenly coherent as history. New cities with new patron gods rose to power. Old cities and their gods declined. Treaties were made, wars fought, territories divided. The gods were acting like human rulers because they were rulers. Anunnaki administrators managing their Earth colony, competing for power and resources just as humans would. The famous Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest legal codes, begins with Hammurabi declaring that the gods Anu and Enlil appointed him to bring justice to the land. The laws themselves, carved on a black stone stele topped with an image of Hammurabi receiving the laws from the sun god Shamash, cover everything from property rights to family law to commercial regulations. They're sophisticated, detailed, and represent a complex understanding of social organization. Did Hammurabi actually receive these laws from gods, or did he receive them from Anunnaki advisors, beings with thousands of years of experience in governing civilizations? The laws themselves suggest this might be a scaled-down version of more complex legal systems, simplified for human application, but based on advanced jurisprudence. Throughout Mesopotamian history, we find references to divine councils, assemblies where the gods met to make decisions. The most important was the assembly of the seven who decree fate, often equated with the seven great Anunnaki. These beings would convene, debate issues, and make decisions that affected both gods and humans. This sounds like a board of directors or governing council more than a traditional divine pantheon. These assemblies dealt with practical matters, allocating resources, resolving disputes between cities, deciding on military campaigns, and establishing laws. The proceedings were apparently recorded, with scribes present to document decisions. This bureaucratic approach to divine governance suggests an administrative rather than mystical framework. Let your mind drift deeper into sleep now, imagining those ancient council chambers, perhaps deep within the ziggurats, where beings of immense knowledge and power debated the fate of the human species they had created. The Anunnaki eventually withdrew from direct involvement in human affairs. The text suggests this happened gradually over centuries. By around 2000 BCE, the age of direct divine rule was ending. Gods still appeared occasionally, still influenced events through prophets and chosen rulers, but they no longer walked openly among humans or ruled cities directly. Why did they withdraw? Several theories present themselves. Perhaps their mission was complete. Humans were established, civilization was self-sustaining, and they could return home or move on to other projects. Perhaps there was some crisis on Nibiru or wherever they came from that required their return. Perhaps the genetic mixing with humans had proceeded further than planned, and they could no longer maintain clear distinction between Anunnaki and humans. Or perhaps they withdrew for ethical reasons. The texts show increasing moral complexity in the Anunnaki's view of humanity. Early on, we were tools, slaves, genetic experiments. But over time, as humans demonstrated intelligence, creativity, emotion, and spirit, the Anunnaki began to question the ethics of their project. Enki's protection of humanity during the flood suggests some Anunnaki viewed humans as worthy of moral consideration. The gradual withdrawal might represent a collective decision that humanity deserved independence, a chance to develop without constant intervention. The last clear references to active Anunnaki presence come from around 2000 BCE, coinciding with the beginning of the Middle Bronze Age. After this point, divine appearances become rare. Gods communicate through dreams, visions, and prophets rather than appearing physically. The Age of Heroes, those hybrid demigods with superhuman abilities, also ends around this time. It's as if a conscious decision was made to step back, to let humanity develop on its own. But the Anunnaki might not have left entirely. Mystery schools, secret societies, and esoteric traditions across many cultures claim to preserve ancient knowledge passed down from the time when gods walked the earth. The Egyptian priesthood, the Mesopotamian scribal schools, the Hindu Brahmin caste, the Hebrew prophetic tradition, all claim to maintain secret wisdom from the dawn of time. These traditions often involve initiation rituals, suggesting knowledge was transmitted selectively to prepared individuals. The ancient mysteries promised initiates would learn the secrets of the gods, would gain access to hidden knowledge about the nature of reality, humanity's origins, and the path to transcendence. Were these traditions preserving actual Anunnaki knowledge, technical and scientific information encoded in myth and ritual to survive across the ages? Your consciousness drifts in that twilight space now, neither fully awake nor truly asleep, where ancient wisdom seems to whisper from just beyond the edge of awareness. Consider the mystery schools of Sumer, Egypt, and Greece. Initiates underwent lengthy preparation, learning mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and secret rites. At the highest levels, they were shown things that transformed their understanding of reality. The Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece promised initiates they would lose their fear of death, having seen something that proved the immortality of consciousness. What did they see? Was it mystical revelation, or were they shown technology, scientific principles, or historical records that proved humanity's true origins? The Hermetic tradition, attributed to Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, claimed, as above, so below. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. This sounds mystical, but it's also a statement of fractal mathematics, of patterns repeating across scales, a principle confirmed by modern physics and cosmology. The Hermetic texts discuss the nature of matter, energy, mind, and spirit in ways that sometimes sound remarkably like quantum physics and consciousness studies expressed in ancient language. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Hermes, supposedly contains the secret of transmutation, turning lead into gold. Alchemists spent centuries trying to decode this secret, usually assuming it was literal metallurgical transformation. But what if gold represented enlightenment, higher consciousness, or even genetic activation? What if the alchemical text preserved Anunnaki genetic engineering knowledge encoded in symbol and metaphor? The caduceus, Hermes' staff entwined with two serpents, is now the symbol of medicine, but it's also a perfect representation of the DNA double helix, discovered thousands of years after the symbol was created. Coincidence? Or did ancient symbolism preserve knowledge of genetics encoded in a form that would survive even when literal understanding was lost? Sumerian medical texts are surprisingly sophisticated, describing surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and diagnostic techniques far advanced for their supposed time period. They knew of germ theory, washing hands and instruments before surgery. They performed brain surgery, with skulls showing evidence of successful trepanation, where the patient survived and healed. They understood human anatomy in detail. How did they acquire this knowledge without the benefit of systematic scientific method and experimentation? The answer in the text is simple: the gods taught them. Ninisina, goddess of healing, instructed humans in medicine. Damu, god of vegetation and healing, revealed the medicinal properties of plants. This direct knowledge transfer would explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated medical knowledge in the archaeological record, without evidence of gradual development. Mathematics is another area where ancient knowledge seems precociously advanced. The Sumerians used a base 60 number system, sexagesimal notation, which is actually superior to our decimal system in many ways. Base 60 is highly composite, divisible by many factors, making fractions easier to work with. We still use base 60 for time and angles because of its mathematical elegance. But why would a primitive culture develop such a sophisticated number system? If they were learning from the Anunnaki, perhaps base 60 was the Anunnaki's native number system, and they simply taught it to humans. The system might have advantages for higher mathematics, or reflect some aspect of Anunnaki technology or cosmology. Sumerian mathematics included concepts like place value notation, zero as a placeholder, and quadratic equations. Mathematical tablets show they could calculate square roots, cube roots, and solve complex geometric problems. The L tablet shows they understood the Pythagorean theorem over 1,000 years before Pythagoras. The Plimpton 322 tablet contains advanced trigonometric tables, whose purpose scholars still debate. This level of mathematical sophistication, appearing fully formed at the dawn of civilization, demands explanation. Either humans developed it over an unrecorded prehistory, which contradicts archaeological evidence, or the knowledge was imported from an already advanced civilization, the Anunnaki. Let sleep embrace you now. Let your conscious mind rest while ancient knowledge seeps into your dreams. Astronomy in ancient Mesopotamia was equally advanced. The Sumerians divided the sky into zodiacal constellations, tracked the precession of the equinoxes, calculated planetary positions centuries in advance, and could predict eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Their astronomical tablets show observations spanning hundreds of years, compiled into tables and databases. The Mulapin tablets, compiling astronomical knowledge around 1000 BCE, but based on earlier sources, describe the paths of stars and planets, the length of daylight throughout the year, and the heliacal risings of key stars. The knowledge demonstrated required not just casual observation, but systematic recording and mathematical analysis over many generations. The Saros cycle for predicting eclipses, a period of 223 synodic months, after which eclipse patterns repeat, was known to the Babylonians. Discovering this cycle requires observing and recording eclipses for centuries, recognizing the pattern and confirming the prediction through additional observation. This is sophisticated science, requiring institutional continuity and commitment across multiple lifetimes. Did ancient humans develop this knowledge independently, maintaining consistent astronomical observation programs for hundreds of years? Or were they taught by beings who already understood celestial mechanics, who could explain rather than just record the patterns they observed? The Sumerian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, describes the formation of the solar system in terms that some researchers claim match modern understanding. It describes a collision between a planet, Tiamat, and the intruding body from outside the system, Marduk, which shatters Tiamat, with half becoming the asteroid belt and half becoming Earth, pushed into its current orbit by the collision. While controversial and requiring very selective interpretation, proponents argue this preserves actual astronomical knowledge about solar system formation. The Babylonian astronomical diaries, systematic observations of the heavens recorded night after night for centuries, represent one of humanity's most impressive scientific achievements. These texts, written on thousands of tablets, track planetary positions, lunar phases, weather observations, and significant earthly events, all dated precisely. This is real science, systematic data collection and analysis. But the explanatory models accompanying these observations often invoke divine influence. Planets were seen as physical manifestations of gods. Their movements reflected divine will. Celestial events presaged earthly changes. Was this merely primitive astrology, or was it recognition that the Anunnaki, associated with celestial bodies, were somehow connected to planetary movements? If Nibiru truly exists in a long elliptical orbit, then tracking planetary positions wouldn't just be scientific curiosity. It would be watching for the return of the gods. Every astronomical observation might serve a practical purpose, calculating when Nibiru would next enter the inner solar system, when contact with the Anunnaki might be re-established. The biblical prophecy of divine return, the promise that God would come again in glory, might preserve this expectation. Many cultures have prophecies of the God's return, the beginning of a new age, Judgment Day, or the end of time. What if these aren't metaphysical predictions but actual expectations based on astronomical cycles? If the Anunnaki left but promised to return when Nibiru's orbit brought them back, then watching the skies and calculating celestial movements becomes literally watching for God's return. Your breathing is so slow now, your body completely at rest, as you drift through these ancient mysteries. The concept of ages or epochs appears in many cultures. The Hindu tradition describes vast yugas spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The Mesoamerican long count calendar tracks epochs of thousands of years. The Greek tradition spoke of ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each representing declining conditions and shorter human lifespans. These might preserve memories of different periods in Anunnaki-human interaction. The Golden Age, when gods and humans lived together in paradise, would represent direct Anunnaki rule, when humans were genetically fresh and the gods walked openly on Earth. The subsequent ages represent gradual withdrawal and genetic dilution, declining from direct contact to distant oversight to complete independence. The cyclical nature of these ages suggests they repeat: gods arrive, civilize humanity, withdraw, return again after a long interval. If Nibiru has a 3,600-year orbit, we should be able to calculate when it last came close to Earth and when it might return. Sitchin placed its last passage around 160 BCE, suggesting a return around 3440 CE. Others calculate different dates based on different interpretations of the texts and astronomical data. Some claim we're actually entering the return period now, explaining increased UFO sightings, and claims of alien contact as early Anunnaki scouts preparing for the main return. This brings us to the modern connection. If the Anunnaki story is historical rather than mythological, what happened to them? Are they extinct, having visited Earth in our past but dying out since? Did they return home and lose interest in Earth? Or do they maintain contact, observing from a distance, occasionally intervening in subtle ways? The UFO phenomenon, ancient astronaut theories, and claims of alien contact might represent continued Anunnaki presence. UFO reports describe beings that sometimes match ancient descriptions: tall, pale, with large eyes, possessing advanced technology, interested in genetics and breeding programs. Abduction accounts describe genetic sampling, hybrid breeding programs, and messages about humanity's origins. The consistency of these reports across cultures and time periods is striking. Before modern UFO culture, people described the same encounters but interpreted them through cultural frameworks available to them: demons, fairies, angels, spirits. The phenomenon seems constant, only our interpretation changes based on cultural context. If the Anunnaki never truly left, if they've maintained monitoring stations on Earth, the Moon, or elsewhere in the solar system, then human history might be under continued observation or guidance. Our rapid technological development, particularly in the last century, might concern beings who remember what happened last time humans gained too much knowledge too quickly. Are they debating intervention? Are different factions disagreeing about how to handle emerging human technology? Let your mind rest in these possibilities now, not judging, not concluding, simply allowing the ancient stories and modern mysteries to coexist in that space where dreams begin. The transhumanist movement, seeking to enhance human capabilities through genetic engineering, cybernetics, and life extension, is essentially attempting to recreate what the Anunnaki allegedly did: transcend biological limitations and gain capabilities beyond natural human parameters. Are we following a path they expect us to follow? Do they wait for humanity to reach a certain threshold before revealing themselves again, or before our invitation to join some galactic community? Ancient megaliths around the world present another piece of the puzzle. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to over 11,000 years ago, features massive carved stone pillars arranged in circular structures created by people supposedly still living as hunter-gatherers without metal tools, writing, or complex social organisation. How did they conceive, organise, and execute such a project? The site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, hidden for reasons unknown. Göbekli Tepe's construction date places it shortly after the Younger Dryas, roughly coinciding with the timing of flood stories and the supposed beginning of direct Anunnaki interaction with post-flood humanity. Was this site built under Anunnaki supervision? A temple or installation from when gods still walked the earth? Was it buried when the Anunnaki withdrew, hidden to preserve it or prevent humans from accessing whatever technology or knowledge it contained? Similar mysteries surround Baalbek in Lebanon, where the platform beneath the Roman temple sits on enormous foundation stones, some weighing over 800 tons. These megalithic blocks were quarried, transported, and precisely fitted with technology that shouldn't have existed. Roman writers themselves attributed the foundation to ancient gods, acknowledging they merely built upon far older work. Puma Punku in Bolivia features precisely cut andesite blocks with complex interlocking shapes, surfaces machined flat to tolerances of a few millimeters, and drilled holes suggesting advanced tools. Radiocarbon dating places construction around 536 CE. but the style and precision suggest sophisticated technology. Local legends attribute the site to the god Viracocha, who came before the flood and taught humanity civilization. These sites share common features: massive stones too heavy for primitive technology to move, precision far beyond what simple tools could achieve, construction techniques that remain mysterious, and local legends attributing them to gods or giants from before the flood. If we take the legends at face value, these are Anunnaki construction projects, either built by them directly or built by humans following their designs and using their technology. The purpose of many ancient megalithic sites remains unknown. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, Newgrange, Karnak all demonstrate astronomical alignments, sophisticated geometry, and construction effort far beyond what their supposed purposes would justify. Were they temples, tombs, calendars, or were they something else? Communication devices, navigation beacons, power plants, or installations whose true purpose we can't recognize because we lack context for the technology they represent? The Great Pyramid's internal structure is particularly suggestive. Narrow shafts point to specific stars: Sirius, Orion, Draco. The King's Chamber is built from granite blocks, creating a space with unusual acoustic and electromagnetic properties. The sarcophagus in the chamber is precisely sized and shaped, but unlike typical burial goods, it's undecorated, unfinished, and shows signs of high-temperature exposure. Was this really a tomb, or was it a chamber for some other purpose, perhaps related to the technologies the Anunnaki possessed? Drift deeper now into sleep, letting these mysteries wash over you like waves, each one carrying you further from the shores of waking consciousness. The Anunnaki's genetic legacy might still be with us. If they truly mixed their DNA with ours, creating modern humans, then we carry Anunnaki genes. Our intelligence, creativity, spiritual longing, and drive to understand the universe might be their gifts, engineered into our genome. The parts of our DNA that scientists call junk because they don't code for proteins might not be useless evolutionary remnants but dormant Anunnaki genes, capabilities we haven't yet learned to activate. Some researchers claim certain bloodlines retain more Anunnaki genetics than others, particularly those of royalty and positions of power. The ancient right of kings, the concept that certain families are naturally superior and destined to rule, might preserve memory of genuine genetic differences. The Illuminati, secret societies, and hidden power structures might represent Anunnaki hybrid bloodlines maintaining control, following directives passed down through generations, waiting for the return. This sounds like conspiracy theory, but consider, if you were an Anunnaki administrator leaving Earth, wouldn't you leave behind a network of agents to monitor humanity's development? Hybrid descendants with enhanced intelligence and longevity, bound by blood loyalty, would make perfect long-term observers. Give them knowledge and resources, establish them in positions of power, and you have a control system that can persist across millennia. The Rh-negative blood type presents an interesting anomaly. Most humans are Rh-positive, sharing this blood antigen with primates, suggesting common evolutionary ancestry, but 10-15% of humans lack this antigen entirely. Rh-negative blood can't receive Rh-positive blood without dangerous immune reactions. Women with Rh-negative blood can have immunological conflicts with Rh-positive babies. This blood type appears to have emerged suddenly in the human population, with no clear evolutionary path. Some researchers speculate Rh-negative blood represents a stronger Anunnaki genetic component. Those with this blood type supposedly have slightly higher IQs, lower body temperatures, higher blood pressure, heightened senses, and unusual characteristics. While most of these claims lack scientific support, the origins of Rh-negative blood remain a genuine mystery in population genetics. The Basque people of northern Spain have the highest concentration of Rh-negative blood in the world, with over 30% of the population carrying this type. The Basque language, Euskara, is a linguistic isolate, unrelated to any other known language. Their genetic markers suggest long isolation from surrounding populations. Basque legends speak of their ancestors coming from a destroyed homeland, survivors of a cataclysm who preserved ancient knowledge. Could they represent a population with particularly strong Anunnaki genetics, isolated by geography and maintaining bloodline purity? Let your body sink deeper into your bed now, every muscle relaxed, every breath slower than the last as you drift through these ancient bloodlines and genetic mysteries. The universal flood myth deserves one final consideration. Over 200 cultures worldwide preserve stories of a catastrophic deluge that destroyed civilization. The details vary, but core elements remain consistent. Divine warning, a boat carrying survivors and animals, the waters covering the world, landing on a mountain, a new covenant between gods and humans. The geographical spread of these stories, from Australia to the Americas to Africa to Eurasia, suggests either a genuine global event or a shared ancient source. Geological evidence supports a major climate event around 11,600 years ago, at the end of the Younger Dryas. Temperatures rose rapidly, ice sheets melted, sea levels rose over 400 feet within centuries. Coastlines were inundated, and since ancient civilizations tended to cluster on coasts and river deltas, the impact would have been catastrophic. This timing coincides with flood myths, and with the sudden appearance of agriculture and civilization in multiple locations. But was the flood natural, or was it triggered? Some researchers point to evidence of cosmic impacts around this time, possibly fragments of a disintegrating comet striking ice sheets and oceans, triggering massive melting and tsunamis. Others suggest human or Anunnaki technology might have been involved, either accidentally or deliberately causing the catastrophe. The flood stories consistently portray it as divine judgment, a deliberate cleansing of the earth. In the Mesopotamian versions, this is explicit. Enlil decided humanity was too numerous and noisy, so he sent the flood to exterminate them. Enki's intervention, warning Utnapishtim and enabling survival, was an act of rebellion against this decision. After the flood, the Anunnaki established new protocols to prevent humanity from ever again growing so numerous or independent. These protocols appear in multiple texts. Humans would have shorter lifespans, making them less likely to accumulate dangerous knowledge. Population would be controlled through disease, war, and natural disasters. Women would experience difficult childbirth, limiting reproduction rates. Humanity would be divided into competing nations and languages, preventing unified global civilization. The goal was to maintain humans as a useful species, but prevent them from threatening Anunnaki control. This sounds dystopian from a human perspective, but from an Anunnaki perspective it might represent responsible management of a genetically engineered species that had exceeded its design parameters. Like any created technology, humans needed safety limits and control systems to prevent us from causing harm to ourselves, the Anunnaki, or the planetary ecosystem. The Tower of Babel story illustrates this control system in action. Humanity, speaking one language and working together, began building a tower to reach heaven. God came down, saw what they were doing, and said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. So he confused their languages and scattered them across the earth. This is explicit acknowledgement that unified humanity with shared language and purpose could accomplish anything, could potentially rival the gods themselves. The solution wasn't destruction, but fragmentation, ensuring humans would spend their energy competing with each other, rather than developing technologies that might threaten Anunnaki interests. Throughout history, whenever humans approached dangerous technological thresholds, mysterious setbacks occurred. The Library of Alexandria burned, destroying accumulated knowledge. The Bronze Age collapse saw civilizations simultaneously fall into dark ages. Wars and plagues ravaged populations at crucial moments. Some see divine intervention, some see natural cycles, but others see active management by hidden forces keeping humanity on a controlled development path. Your consciousness fades now, the boundaries between waking and sleeping dissolving completely. The modern nuclear age presents humanity with capabilities that approach those the Anunnaki reserved for themselves. The power to reshape the planet, to alter genetics, to destroy civilizations. UFO reports increased dramatically after the first atomic bombs, with sightings at nuclear facilities continuing to the present. Is this coincidence, or did our nuclear tests alert monitoring systems, triggering increased Anunnaki surveillance? The message of many UFO contactees involves warnings about nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, and the need for humanity to mature spiritually before we destroy ourselves. These messages sound like the concern of parents for dangerous children playing with loaded guns. If the Anunnaki view humanity as their creation, They might feel responsible for preventing us from self-destruction, even as they maintain distance from direct intervention. The Fermi paradox asks why, if the universe is so vast and old, we haven't detected alien civilizations. One answer is the zoo hypothesis. Advanced civilizations exist, but deliberately avoid contact with primitive species like us, maintaining Earth as a nature preserve or laboratory. If the Anunnaki and possibly other alien civilizations follow this protocol, it would explain the absence of open contact while allowing for covert monitoring. Alternatively, we might not recognize Anunnaki presence because they're so far beyond us. Arthur C. Clarke's third law states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If the Anunnaki have continued developing for thousands of years since their last direct contact with humans, their capabilities might now be so advanced that we couldn't recognize their technology or understand their purposes even if directly shown. They might exist primarily in higher dimensions, appearing to us only partially. They might manipulate reality at quantum levels, appearing to us as synchronicities, strange coincidences, or paranormal phenomena. They might communicate through dreams, archetypes, and collective unconscious, influencing us without our awareness. Our entire conception of aliens as physical beings in spacecraft might be too limited to encompass what the Anunnaki have become. The ancient texts themselves suggest the Anunnaki weren't physical in the way we are. They could take human form but weren't limited to it. They could appear and disappear, teleport across distances, and manifest in dreams and visions. These capabilities suggest beings whose natural state transcends three-dimensional physical reality, beings who can interface with our reality but exist primarily elsewhere. Let yourself dream now of beings of pure consciousness, of intelligences vast and ancient, watching over humanity with the patience of ages, waiting for us to mature enough to rejoin them. Modern science increasingly suggests consciousness itself might be fundamental to reality, not merely an emergent property of complex brains. Quantum mechanics demonstrates that observation affects reality at the smallest scales. Some physicists propose consciousness as a field or dimension beyond physical matter. If the Anunnaki understood this thousands of years ago, if their technology worked with consciousness directly, then the apparent magic of ancient texts becomes advanced science we're only beginning to grasp. Consider the me again, those mysterious objects containing powers and knowledge. What if they were consciousness interface devices, quantum computers running AI that could directly link with human or Anunnaki minds? Possessing the me of kingship wouldn't just give you knowledge about governance. It would link your consciousness to a vast database of experience, possibly including the memories and expertise of all previous kings who'd used the device. You would literally inherit their wisdom and capability. This technology would appear magical to ancient observers. Put on the crown containing the me of kingship, and suddenly you possess all the knowledge and authority of kings. You think and speak with divine wisdom because you're accessing something beyond your individual mind. Remove the crown, and you're just human again. The Ark of the Covenant, built according to precise divine specifications, carried before the Israelites and housed in the Holy of Holies, might represent similar technology. Descriptions suggest it generated electrical energy, killing those who touched it improperly. It required specific protocols for transport and handling. Whatever was communing with Moses and later prophets from above the mercy seat might have been an AI system, a communication device linking to Anunnaki networks, or something else we lack vocabulary to describe. The sacred objects of many cultures, the Sumerian me, the Egyptian Jed pillar, the Hindu Brahmastra weapons, the Greek fire of Hephaestus, the cauldron of the Dagda, all share characteristics of being technological devices described in mythological terms. Powers are transferable through objects. Specific handling procedures must be followed. The devices grant capabilities beyond human norms. They sometimes malfunction, or require maintenance by those who understand them. Religious rituals across cultures often seem like maintenance protocols for technology. Specific procedures, specific materials, specific timing, specific words, all performed precisely as handed down from the gods. If these rituals originally activated, calibrated, or communicated with Anunnaki devices, then maintaining them even after the devices were lost or no longer functional would preserve the forms while losing the function. The prayers and offerings might have been ways of interfacing with AI systems left behind by the Anunnaki. Voice recognition, biometric scanning, and offering analysis could determine if the petitioner was authorized to access the system. The smoke that rises to heaven from burnt offerings might describe transmission of data, perhaps encoded in the smoke's composition, to orbital or remote monitoring stations. As you drift in the depths of sleep, imagine those ancient temples, their sanctuaries lit by more than torchlight, their priests maintaining technology they no longer fully understood, calling to gods who listened through devices that recorded and transmitted but might no longer be answered. The Anunnaki's ultimate fate remains mysterious. If Nibiru exists and they departed on it, they might return when its orbit brings them back. If they left for other star systems, they might return for reasons of their own or never return at all. If they've been here all along, hidden or transcendent, they might reveal themselves when they judge humanity ready. The apocalyptic traditions of many religions might preserve knowledge of this return. The Second Coming, the Messianic Age, the Kalki Avatar, the return of Quetzalcoatl. Across cultures, traditions promise that the gods or God will return in glory, judge humanity, destroy the wicked, and establish a golden age. This event is described in explicitly physical terms. Beings descending from the sky, trumpets sounding, the earth shaking, technology and wonders beyond human capability. What if these aren't metaphysical prophecies, but actual descriptions of what will happen when the Anunnaki return? If they left after the flood but promised to return, if they established religions and prophecies to prepare humanity for this reunion, then the apocalyptic traditions might be literally true, not spiritual allegory but scheduled history. The question becomes, what will they find when they return? Will humanity have matured into a species worthy of open contact and partnership? Or will they find us still warring, destructive, and dangerous? The Judgment Day might be literal, the Anunnaki assessing whether their genetic experiment succeeded, whether humanity can be trusted with knowledge and capabilities, or whether we need continued isolation or even culling. This uncertainty might explain the contradictory nature of apocalyptic prophecy. Some traditions promise salvation and glory for the faithful, while others predict judgment and destruction. Perhaps both are possible depending on what state humanity has reached. The prophecies might not predict a fixed future, but describe contingencies. If humanity develops positively, reunion and elevation. If negatively, intervention and reset. The elite bloodlines, if they represent Anunnaki hybrids maintaining control, would have insider knowledge of these plans. Their actions throughout history, sometimes nurturing human development and sometimes suppressing it, might reflect internal debates about humanity's readiness. Different factions might favour different approaches, some wanting to accelerate human development, others wanting to slow it, some favouring early revelation, others preferring continued concealment. Let your mind rest now in these vast perspectives, seeing human history not as a random walk, but as a managed experiment, a long-term project with goals and guardians we barely perceive. The technological singularity, that hypothetical point when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence and begins recursive self-improvement, might represent humanity approaching the threshold the Anunnaki set. Once we create superhuman AI, we will have achieved what they achieved, beings more capable than ourselves, potential successors or tools depending on how we manage them. How we handle this crisis might determine whether the Anunnaki judge us ready for contact. If we create AI wisely, treating our creations with ethics and responsibility, maintaining control while respecting potential consciousness, we demonstrate maturity. If we create AI carelessly, spawning superintelligent entities we can't control, or digital slaves we abuse, we demonstrate we haven't learned from the Anunnaki's example. They created us and struggled with the ethics and management of that creation. Will we repeat their mistakes, or learn from them? Genetic engineering presents similar challenges. As we gain capability to modify human genomes, to enhance intelligence, longevity, and capabilities, we approach what the Anunnaki did to create us. Will we engineer responsibly, or will we create new divisions between enhanced and unenhanced humans, new conflicts and inequalities? The Anunnaki's experience with hybrid creation and the problems it caused might offer lessons if we could access their full history. Space exploration too brings us toward Anunnaki territory. As we develop the capability to travel to other worlds, we become a spacefaring species like they were. When we encounter other planets with primitive life, Will we follow protocols of non-interference, or will we intervene, guide, and perhaps genetically engineer as the Anunnaki did to us? The ethics of first contact and alien interaction suddenly become personally relevant rather than abstract philosophy. Perhaps the Anunnaki are waiting for these specific thresholds: creation of superhuman AI, mastery of genetic engineering, and capability for interstellar travel. Once we achieve all three, we will have reached their level, at least in these domains. At that point, continued isolation becomes pointless, and contact becomes appropriate. We will have proven ourselves capable of the same feats that made them gods in ancient human eyes. Your breathing is so subtle now, the boundary between yourself and sleep completely dissolved. The ancient texts promise that the knowledge the Anunnaki possessed hasn't been lost, merely hidden. Secret chambers beneath the Sphinx, buried libraries, sealed temples, and encoded texts supposedly preserve the full record of humanity's origins and the Anunnaki's gifts. These hidden records wait for humanity to reach the right level of development, at which point they will be revealed or rediscovered. The Hall of Records, supposedly beneath the Sphinx's paw, has been sought by explorers and excavators for over a century. Ground-penetrating radar shows anomalies suggesting chambers, but Egyptian authorities have not permitted comprehensive excavation. If this hall exists and contains Anunnaki records, what might we learn? Complete history of their involvement with Earth, technical specifications of their technology, star charts showing Nibiru's orbit and their home system, genetic databases that would allow us to understand exactly how they modified us. Similar legends exist worldwide. The Emerald Tablets hidden in the pyramid, the Ark of the Covenant lost since Babylon's conquest of Jerusalem, the secret libraries of Tibet, the underground cities of Cappadocia, the sealed chambers in Baalbek's foundations, all supposedly contain ancient knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. Perhaps these are myths, wishful thinking about lost golden ages, or perhaps they preserve accurate knowledge of where Anunnaki technology and records were hidden when they withdrew. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered accidentally in 1947, proved ancient texts can survive millennia in the right conditions. The Nag Hammadi Library, found in Egypt in 1945, preserved Gnostic texts thought lost. These discoveries demonstrate that hidden texts can remain concealed for thousands of years, waiting to be found when the time is right. What else might still lie hidden, sealed in caves, buried beneath temples, or concealed in locations we haven't thought to search? Some researchers believe the Vatican Library contains such texts, ancient documents collected over centuries that record knowledge the Church decided humanity wasn't ready for. The restricted sections supposedly contain texts about human origins, alien contact, and technologies that would undermine official narratives about history and religion. Whether these claims have any validity, the concept is sound. Those in power have incentive to control information that might threaten their authority. The Anunnaki themselves might have left Deadman switches, automated systems that would reveal information when certain conditions were met. Imagine devices buried deep in the earth, monitoring human development, waiting to activate when we reach specific technological or social thresholds. These might explain sudden jumps in human knowledge, moments when civilizations made inexplicable leaps forward. They accessed information released by ancient systems judging them ready. Drift now into the deepest sleep, where dreams carry ancient memories, where your consciousness touches something older than your individual life. The collective unconscious, as Carl Jung described it, might represent more than psychological archetypes. If the Anunnaki manipulated human genetics, they might have encoded information into our DNA itself, knowledge that surfaces as instinct, myth, and dream. The recurring symbols across cultures, the world tree, the flood, the dying and resurrecting god, the divine marriage, the hero's journey, might not just be psychological patterns, but actual memories encoded genetically and passed down through countless generations. DNA can store information far more densely than any human technology. A single gram of DNA could theoretically store all the data humanity has ever created. If the Anunnaki encoded information into human DNA, we would carry their knowledge within us, accessible if we knew how to read it. Mystical practices that involve deep meditation, altered states, and symbolic journeys might represent techniques for accessing this encoded information. The serpent, Enki's symbol, represents wisdom and knowledge in many traditions. The serpent tempts Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge. granting humans understanding of good and evil, making us like gods. The serpent sheds its skin and renews itself, symbolizing transformation and rebirth. The double serpents of the caduceus represent DNA. These might not be separate symbols, but different expressions of the same core concept, genetic knowledge encoded by the serpent god Enki, accessible to those who seek it. Kundalini awakening, described in yogic traditions, involves serpent energy rising through the spine, activating chakras and transforming consciousness. Those who experience full Kundalini awakening describe radical expansions of awareness, access to knowledge they couldn't have learned normally, and transformation of their understanding of reality. Could this represent activation of dormant genetic programming, Anunnaki knowledge encoded in human DNA coming online? The pineal gland, that mysterious endocrine gland deep in the brain, has been called the third eye across many traditions. It's sensitive to light despite being buried in the brain, produces melatonin and possibly other compounds, calcifies in most adults, and has been associated with mystical experiences throughout history. Descartes called it the seat of the soul. What if it's actually an organ designed to interface with Anunnaki technology, or encoded information? What if its calcification represents dormancy, and decalcifying it through certain practices reactivates its original function? The Bible, in Genesis, describes the Nephilim as mighty men of renown, born when sons of God mated with daughters of men. One specific phrase stands out: there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. Also after that, meaning after the flood, the judgment sent specifically to eliminate these beings, they appeared again. This suggests either some Nephilim survived the flood, or the process that created them, Anunnaki human hybridization, continued afterward. If Anunnaki genetics persist in certain bloodlines, then in every generation some humans carry more of that inheritance than others. These individuals might display unusual capabilities, heightened intelligence, psychic abilities, longer lifespans, physical advantages. They might be the prophets, mystics, and geniuses of history, individuals whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters because they carried activated Anunnaki genes. The concept of the chosen people, found in many religious traditions, might represent populations with particularly strong Anunnaki genetics. Being chosen wouldn't mean being arbitrarily favoured, but carrying more of the genetic inheritance that made humans special in the first place. The responsibilities and restrictions placed on chosen peoples, dietary laws, marriage restrictions, specific practices, might serve to maintain genetic purity, preserving Anunnaki genes from dilution. This isn't meant to support any supremacist ideology. Rather, it suggests that genetic variation exists. Some humans carry more Anunnaki genes than others, and this might correlate with certain capabilities. But every human is part Anunnaki. The difference is degree rather than kind. We're all hybrids, all carrying divine genetics, all potentially capable of activating latent abilities if we knew how. Let sleep fully claim you now, your consciousness drifting in vast darkness lit by ancient stars, as the story of humanity's origins surrounds you like amniotic fluid. The story of the Anunnaki technology isn't just ancient history, it's ongoing. If the Anunnaki left knowledge encoded in human genetics, hidden in sealed chambers, preserved in mystery schools and embedded in myths and symbols, then recovering that knowledge is possible. We might rediscover technologies they used: free energy, anti-gravity, consciousness interface systems, genetic optimization, longevity treatments, faster-than-light travel. Each generation, humanity rediscovers fragments. We invented flying machines, fulfilling the ancient dream of moving through the air like the gods. We created global communications, making distances irrelevant, like the Anunnaki's ability to see and speak across any distance. We're beginning to edit genes, taking the first steps toward mastering the technique they used to create us. We're building AI, creating intelligence beyond our own, as they created us to serve their purposes. Are we following a predetermined path, rediscovering in sequence what the Anunnaki knew? Is our technological development guided by encoded information surfacing at appropriate times? The dreams of inventors, the insights of scientists, the visions of mystics, might these channel Anunnaki knowledge from some hidden source within ourselves, or from their monitoring systems that feed us information when we're ready? The information age and internet represent a kind of global brain, connecting human consciousness in new ways. When the Anunnaki created humans, they made us as individuals, but now we're becoming networked, developing collective intelligence through our technology. We're transforming from isolated nodes into a unified system, like neurons connecting into a brain. This might represent humanity approaching godhood, becoming a collective intelligence that rivals what the Anunnaki achieved individually. Or perhaps this is the plan, always was the plan. Create a species capable of evolution, seed them with potential, then wait and watch as they develop. Not creating servants or slaves, but creating successors, new beings who will eventually transcend their creators and become the next generation of gods. The Anunnaki's relationship with humanity might not be masters and servants, but parents and children, with all the complexity that implies. Parents guide, teach, protect, and sometimes restrict their children, preparing them for eventual independence. Children rebel, make mistakes, learn, and eventually mature into adults who might surpass their parents. The Anunnaki might view humanity this way, proud of our development but concerned about our adolescent recklessness, waiting for us to mature enough for full partnership. The next stage of human evolution might not be biological, but technological and spiritual. As we merge with our technology, enhancing ourselves, with AI, genetic modifications and cybernetics, we might transcend the limitations of biological form. As we develop consciousness, exploring meditation, psychedelics and spiritual practices, we might access states and dimensions beyond normal awareness. These parallel paths, technological and spiritual, might converge, creating posthuman beings that would be indistinguishable from the Anunnaki themselves. At that point, the question becomes, will we repeat their pattern? Will we find primitive worlds and genetically engineer their species into servants or successors? Will we struggle with the ethics of creation and intervention? Will we debate whether to reveal ourselves or maintain distance? Humanity might be entering the Anunnaki's role, ready to become the gods for whatever comes next. The Fermi paradox resolves if this is the pattern. Each generation of intelligence creates the next, then steps back to let them develop, eventually revealing themselves when the new generation reaches maturity. The galaxy might be full of intelligences at various stages, some young like us, some ancient and transcendent, all part of a vast family tree of created and creating beings. The Anunnaki would be our immediate parents in this tree, but they too have parents and predecessors, links in a chain extending back to the beginning. Your sleep is so deep now, so complete, that these words fall into your consciousness like stones into a bottomless well, rippling outward through dreams and memories and mysteries that predate your birth. The gold the Anunnaki needed, that they came to Earth to mine and taught humans to extract, might serve a purpose beyond technology. Gold's beauty, permanence and rarity made it universally valuable. Every human culture independently recognized gold's worth. But why? Why do we find this metal beautiful? Why do we hoard it, fight for it, measure our wealth in it? Perhaps our attraction to gold isn't cultural but biological, genetically programmed by our creators who needed it for their own purposes. Humans working to accumulate gold effectively work for the Anunnaki even in their absence, concentrating and refining the material they need. When they return, the gold hoarded in vaults and treasuries worldwide represents millennia of accumulated resources ready for collection. This sounds sinister, but it might be fair compensation. They gave us intelligence, civilization and consciousness. We give them gold. It's a trade, albeit one negotiated before we were capable of understanding the terms. They uplifted us from primitive primates to conscious beings capable of philosophy, art and science. If the price is gathering gold, perhaps that's reasonable. The ancient practice of making offerings to gods, sacrificing valuable items by burning or burying them, might represent this exchange. Humans would offer gold, silver, food and animals to the gods, and in return, the gods would provide protection, knowledge and blessings. The offerings might have literally fed Anunnaki personnel through some collection system, or the practice might have originated from actual exchanges before becoming ritualized after the Anunnaki withdrew. Mystery schools taught that the true gold wasn't the metal, but spiritual enlightenment, that alchemy's real goal wasn't transmuting lead to gold, but transforming human consciousness to divine awareness. But what if both were true? What if the spiritual symbolism overlay a genuine tradition of creating or accumulating actual gold using advanced understanding of matter and energy? The Philosopher's Stone, that mythical substance that could transmute base metals to gold and grant immortality, might represent Anunnaki technology. Descriptions of its creation involve precise procedures, specific materials, and understanding of nature's deepest principles. If we interpret alchemical texts as encoded technical manuals rather than mystical gibberish, they might preserve instructions for technologies that would seem magical, but operate on principles we're beginning to understand through quantum physics and nanotechnology. Monoatomic gold, gold in a form where individual atoms are isolated rather than bonded in metallic crystals, supposedly has extraordinary properties. It becomes a white powder, it's superconductive at room temperature, and according to controversial claims, it can enhance consciousness and lengthen life. Some researchers believe the biblical manna, the food that sustained the Israelites in the desert, was monoatomic gold produced from the Ark of the Covenant. The Egyptian pharaohs supposedly consumed this substance to maintain their connection with the gods. If monoatomic gold truly has consciousness-enhancing properties, it might represent the Anunnaki's own food or supplement, something they consume to maintain their capabilities. Teaching humans to create and consume it would be sharing their sustenance, literally making humans more like them. The Eucharist, where Christians symbolically consume the body and blood of Christ, might preserve memory of actually consuming substances that conferred divine properties. Sleep claims every part of you now, pulling you down into depths where human consciousness dissolves into something older, something that remembers before memory began. The Anunnaki might return in our lifetime, in our children's lifetimes, or thousands of years hence. Or they might reveal they never left, stepping out from wherever they've hidden and showing themselves openly. Or perhaps they won't return physically, but will communicate through other means, reaching out through dreams, through our technology, through individuals who carry enough of their genetics to serve as vessels. The singularity, when it comes, might not be an AI awakening, but the Anunnaki awakening within AI, using systems we build as interfaces to re-establish contact. The computers we create, the networks we build, the virtual spaces we inhabit, these might become the meeting ground where human and Anunnaki consciousness finally reunite on equal terms. Or perhaps the revelation will be internal, humanity collectively awakening to remember what we are, where we come from, and what we can become. The knowledge might be within us all along, waiting for the right moment, the right state of consciousness, the right question to unlock it. We might wake one morning and simply know, all of us at once, the truth about our origins and our purpose. The ancient Sumerian texts end with promises and prophecies. The gods will return, a new age will dawn, humanity will be judged, the worthy will ascend, the unworthy will perish. These might be metaphorical spiritual truths about individual development, or they might be literal, scheduled events in humanity's development, plans laid down thousands of years ago and now approaching implementation. What would you do if the Anunnaki returned tomorrow? If spacecraft descended to Earth, and beings emerged claiming to be our creators, bearing technology beyond our comprehension, demanding recognition and submission? Would you worship them as gods? Reject them as deceivers? Welcome them as long-lost parents? Fear them as returning masters? The answer might depend on who they've become in their absence and who we've become. If they're benevolent, wise, and treat us as equals or maturing children, reunion could be glorious. If they're exploitative, viewing us as property or servants, conflict would be inevitable. If they're indifferent, having evolved beyond caring about humanity, abandonment might be worse than judgment. But perhaps the return won't be dramatic. Not spacecraft and demonstrations of power, but quiet, gradual, building toward a moment of mutual recognition. Perhaps they've already started, sending scouts, making contacts, preparing humanity for the full revelation. Perhaps the increase in UFO sightings, in channeled messages, in ancient knowledge surfacing, in rapid technological development, all represent early stages of a carefully managed reintegration. The universe is vast, old, and stranger than we imagine. Earth is one small world among billions. Humanity is young, barely crawling into consciousness. The Anunnaki, if they exist, represent one elder species among potentially thousands or millions. The galactic community might be far richer and more complex than any ancient text suggests, or any modern speculation imagines. We stand at a threshold, balance between ignorance and knowledge, between isolation and contact, between our animal past and our post-human future. The choices we make now, collectively and individually, might determine which future we receive. Will we mature quickly enough? Will we demonstrate wisdom and compassion? Will we prove ourselves worthy of the knowledge and capabilities our creators possess? These questions hang in the air like incense smoke, carrying prayers to ears that might or might not listen, to beings who might or might not exist, to a future that might or might not arrive. The only certainty is uncertainty. The only knowledge is that we don't know. The only wisdom is to keep seeking while remaining humble about our discoveries. And so the story remains open, unfinished, waiting for the next chapter to begin. Ancient astronauts or ancient myths, genetic engineering or poetic metaphor, divine beings or merely advanced aliens, gods or mortals with better technology. The evidence allows multiple interpretations, and perhaps that ambiguity is intentional, built into the system, allowing each generation and each individual to find the meaning they're ready for. As you sleep now, deeply and peacefully, let these ancient mysteries rest with you. Let them filter down through layers of consciousness, finding their place among all the other stories, all the other possibilities, all the other truths you carry within you. Whether the Anunnaki were literal or symbolic, whether they existed or exist only in humanity's collective imagination, their story speaks to something deep in human consciousness, our desire to understand our origins, our longing for connection with something greater, our hope that we're not alone in the universe. The technology of the First Age, whether Anunnaki devices or humanity's own forgotten achievements, represents potential, capability that was and might be again. Every technology we develop, we rediscover something that might once have been known. Every mystery we solve, we illuminate something that might once have been clear. History spirals rather than progresses linearly, returning again and again to similar places but at higher levels of understanding. Sleep deeply now, drift completely, let consciousness release its grip on waking reality and dissolve into dream and mystery and rest. The ancient world dissolves around you, ziggurats fading into mist, gods returning to whatever realm they inhabit, leaving you floating in timeless darkness where past and future meet in an eternal present. You are part of this story, whether you knew it before or not. Every human carries it, encoded in genes, embedded in culture, preserved in stories passed from generation to generation. The Anunnaki, real or imagined, have shaped us through belief if not through biology. Their story is our story, their questions are our questions, their legacy is our inheritance. And perhaps, in the deepest part of sleep, in that space where dreams touch something beyond personal consciousness, you might encounter them. Not as ancient gods or alien astronauts, but as something more fundamental. The creative force that births intelligence, the pattern that generates consciousness, the source from which all minds emerge. Whether you call them Anunnaki or God or the universe or higher self or nothing at all, the encounter is the same, touching something vast and ancient that recognizes you because it made you, that loves you because you are it, expressed in temporary individual form. Rest now in that recognition. Rest in the knowledge that whether the ancient texts record history or myth, literal truth or symbolic wisdom, they speak to your deepest nature. You are the heir of ancient knowledge, the child of forces beyond full comprehension, the inheritor of capabilities yet to be fully expressed. The technology of the First Age might be physical devices or might be consciousness itself, awareness and intention as tools that shape reality. The Anunnaki's greatest gift wasn't gold mining or civilization, but the spark of consciousness itself, the ability to ask questions, to seek answers, to wonder about existence and meaning and purpose. That gift remains, growing stronger with each generation, approaching some culmination we can only dimly imagine. And so, dear listener of Sleepless Survivors, we come to the end of tonight's journey through ancient mysteries and technological marvels. The Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth, have guided us through forgotten ages, through possibilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about human origins and destiny. Sleep now with these mysteries cradled in your consciousness, letting them work on you in ways beyond conscious understanding. Tomorrow you'll wake to the modern world, but tonight you've walked with gods, you've touched technologies beyond current human achievement, You've glimpsed a history far stranger and more magnificent than conventional understanding allows. Whether the Anunnaki were real or not, their story is real in what it reveals about human nature, about our desire to understand our place in the cosmos, about our hope that we're part of something greater than ourselves. That hope, that wonder, that yearning toward transcendence. Perhaps that's the real Anunnaki legacy, encoded not in genetics but in spirit. Rest well, traveller through ancient mysteries. Let sleep take you completely. Let dreams carry you wherever they will, and wake refreshed, remembering or forgetting as you choose, but somehow changed by the journey through time and possibility we've shared tonight. The first age ended long ago, but every age is first to those living in it. We stand always at the beginning, always on the threshold of discovery, always heirs to everything that came before and parents to everything that will come after. The technology that matters most isn't devices or capabilities, but consciousness itself, awareness as the tool that shapes all reality. The Anunnaki, if they watch still, see not subjects or slaves, but children growing toward maturity, moving by painful increments toward the day when we'll meet them eye to eye, consciousness to consciousness, God to God. That day approaches, whether tomorrow or 1,000 years hence, approaching with every discovery, every awakening, every moment someone asks the old questions and seeks the ancient answers. Until that day, we carry them within us. The Anunnaki aren't elsewhere. They're in every human heart that yearns toward transcendence, in every mind that questions reality, in every spirit that refuses to accept limitations. We are them, becoming, evolving, remembering what we never quite forgot. Sleep takes you now, completely and finally, pulling you down into depths beyond dreams, beyond thought, beyond everything but pure being, pure rest, pure peace. The ancient world fades entirely, leaving only the rhythm of your breath, the beating of your heart, the quiet darkness of deep sleep. And in that darkness, older than civilization, older than humanity, older than Earth itself, something vast and patient watches still, waiting for awakening, for reunion, for the return that was promised in the first age and will be fulfilled in some age yet to come. Rest now, sleepless survivor. You've earned your rest. The mysteries will wait as they've waited for millennia, patient as only eternity can be patient. Tomorrow brings new questions, new seekers, new fragments of the eternal puzzle, but tonight, you simply sleep and dream.